I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello horror hounds, and welcome to my horror house as an early Christmas present for myself towards the fag end of 2019. I treated myself to the Arrow release of the Exorcist III Blu-ray, which had the sort of holy grail of the Legion director's cut on it. I want to talk about what is touted on here as the Legion director's cut. I'm not going to refer to it as the director's cut of the movie. The director's cut is the theatrical cut. It is Exorcist III that we know and love and that I have talked about quite often on this channel. I'm going to talk about it more in terms of an assembly cut, like the Alien 3 assembly cut, because what we are presented with is clearly not a finished, polished version that William Peter Blatty would have presented to us as Legion. Morgan Creek wanted to tie it more closely to The Exorcist, and they wanted a film called Exorcist III, and they demanded some reshoots, and what we got was Exorcist III, and that is the director's cut. What we have here with Legion is an assembly of existing footage that closely replicates Blatty's original script, the film he originally intended to make. Most of that assembled footage is reinserted from VHS duplicates of the Daily Rushes, and there's some 35mm footage inserted as well. Do not tune into Legion expecting to watch a polished, finished product. This is more of a map which points towards a director's original intention. Obviously, picture quality varies wildly. Screen ratio changes, audio quality rises and dips dramatically. And because some footage is still missing, the ending feels incredibly rushed. This reconstruction, therefore, is reliant on long static takes, and that's not too off-putting because Blatty relied on long static takes anyway. You can see that in the theatrical cut Exorcist III. What is absent though are the cutaways, things like, you know, the shots of a dripping tap, or close-ups of some of the bric-a-brac in a room, you know, the rose in the vase, some other piece of close-up detail that Blatty uses so effectively to punctuate extremely dialogue-heavy scenes, to manipulate the pace, to underline key moments of dialogue or silence. So instead, it is just presented to us in one take. But what the Lord taketh away, the Lord also giveth. What we do get is Brad Dourif's entire performance as Patient X. The conceit in Legion is that Father Karras always looked like Brad Dourif. He didn't look like Jason Miller. When Lieutenant Kinderman enters cell 11 and sees Dourif, he sees a man who looks like Damien Karras. Morgan Creek wanted closer ties to William Friedkin's The Exorcist and ordered reshoots and recasting, and Jason Miller was recast as Patient X, returning previously having portrayed Father Damien Karras. And let's be clear, not all the changes mandated by Morgan Creek were for the worse. For one, the design of cell 11 for the reshoot is a quantum leap beyond how the cell looked in the original shoot. Secondly, rather than completely scrapping Brad Dourif's great performance, Dourif and Miller in Exorcist III share the role of Patient X, and this is a really elegant solution to a casting problem and a reshoot problem, which produced a remarkable effect where we are clearly presented with the duality of a person under Kinderman's scrutiny, a person who on the outside looks like Damien Karras, yet on the inside is claiming to be James Veneman, the Gemini killer, who is dead.
Are they calling these Gemini killings in the paper? It's important. You must get them to do that, Lieutenant.
The Gemini is dead.
No, I am not. I am alive. I go on. I breathe. See to it's known or I will punish you.
Are they calling these Gemini killings in the papers? You must get them to do that, Lieutenant. It's important.
The Gemini is dead.
No, I am not! I'm alive! I go on! I breathe! Look at me! Look at me! And tell me what you see!
I see a man who looks like Damien Karras.
Dourif had 2 weeks to perform Patient X for Legion and 2 days, I understand, to perform it again for the reshoots. And honestly, both performances have their strengths. One of the great things that Legion affords us is the ability to see unfiltered his original performance. I actually think the reshoot performance is a little broader than his original performance, but it's also a little more urgent. If you're into the Exorcist mythology like I am, particularly those aspects of the Exorcist mythology that have Blatty's fingerprints all over them, then the differences in casting from Exorcist III and Legion lead to radically different readings of both versions of the film. In Exorcist III, poor old Damien Karras has seriously actually been trapped inside his own body while this killer has tormented and started tearing people apart. But he's been in there with them, suffering for 15 years. What the Gemini says is true, because in Exorcist III, we have moments where Jason Miller is playing Damien Karras trapped inside his own comatose body. In Legion, even though Patient X has the same lines, he's in here with us, he has to watch while I rip and tear, etc., etc. It's a lie. There is absolutely nothing in the Legion cut to indicate that that is in any way true. And if you want to think that 15 years previously Karras' soul had ascended into heaven and it's just his body being used as a vehicle for revenge and blasphemy, that's how the movie reads now. In the Legion assembly, Patient X also serves up a variety of possible answers for Kinderman to choose from as to the puzzle of how is this man sitting here who looks like Damien Karras have intimate knowledge of the Gemini murders. Is he Karras, survived from the fall but has a sort of Swiss cheese memory? Did the original Gemini have an accomplice? Was Damien Karras that accomplice? In Exorcist III, we get a few lines from the demon himself, rather than the presence and influence of Pazuzu being alluded to. In Exorcist III, Pazuzu speaks.
Have you come to save God's servant? Well, I must save mine, my son, the Gemini.
In the Legion Assembly, it's all James Veneman. In the Legion Assembly, as well as Dourif's unedited performance, we get a few more precious scenes and moments between Kinderman and Father Dyer. Sort of extended scenes both at the restaurant and also at the hospital after Dyer is admitted there. And so if you are fans of Exorcist III, this relationship is at the beating heart of the story. So any extra interaction, dialogue, scenes between these two characters is absolutely worth its weight in gold. The project, the film, Exorcist III, Legion, whatever, always had a problem with its ending. On this Arrow Blu-ray, I found out that at one stage, after the Gemini killer had attacked Kinderman's family and the nurse falls back unconscious and was thwarted, the script simply read to be continued. Blatty always knew that tying up the film version of this story was going to be tricky. I mean, if you want the cast iron ending to the story, then you're going to have to read the novel Legion. But that is such a literary ending that Blatty, for good or ill, jettisoned a lot of elements in the written story which pay into the ending as written. It's not a cinematic ending, it's a prose ending. It's the ending to a novel, a phenomenal ending. You are really only going to appreciate why the Gemini killer suddenly stops if you read the book. There's maybe one line in the film, two, come to think of it, that allude to Veneman's motives and his father, the evangelical Christian that he wants to shame, and as the film says, go on shaming. That is a slim foundation to build the entire ending of your film on, just a couple of lines to build to, and then it just stops, and because a character we've never seen before dies off screen somewhere else. So in the Legion assembly, we get Kinderman essentially committing murder, just shooting this guy in a psychiatric ward, and that Kinderman's going to jail. And that doesn't seem fair somehow. I don't like that. Now, of course, the theatrical ending, the Exorcist III ending, is a load of whiz-bang nonsense. I mean, who the heck is Father Morning? How the hell does he know what's going on or where to go? And he just rocks up at the end to perform this exorcism and get his skin peeled off while he's stuck to the ceiling. The studio insisted that a movie they insisted be called The Exorcist III should have an exorcism in it. There's a perverse kind of logic there. And it is ludicrous, but at least it's ludicrous while still in the hands of William Peter Blatty. He can give the cheap seats what they want while they're eating their popcorn, while still steering the ship round to some kind of discourse about ideas. Exorcist III, that final exorcism scene, at least gives us Kinderman's speech about belief. The Legion cut seems much more slight without something like that, and clearly, as I say, this is not the director's cut. Legion is pointing away towards what Blatty intended, and I don't think he had ever fully decided how he was intending, under the banner of Legion, to tackle the end of the story, if I'm being honest. Now that I've finally been able to watch this Legion cut of the movie, I'm left with this overall conclusion. I'm a big fan of Exorcist III. I always have been. It's a class act and it drips class from every frame. It's clear that the Legion cut is the closest we'll get to Blatty's original intention for the film, and I'm extremely grateful for that. If you want the pure, undiluted story, you have to read the novel Legion. It's clear that even an assembly cut of what Blatty had intended still involved a certain level of compromise, and I don't think compromise is necessarily a bad thing when some of the solutions that he came up with are so elegant in what we got in Exorcist III. However, seeing something so close to what Blatty wanted makes me greedy and makes me wish for a timeline where he was left free to make his movie exactly the way he wanted to without the interference of Morgan Creek. I would have loved to have seen that film, but I still want Exorcist III to exist as well. And is that okay? Can I have my cake and eat it as well? The larger tapestry of The Exorcist has always been a conversation between different versions of itself. Blatty's novel, Friedkin's original cut, then Friedkin's second cut, the version you've never seen. You have Blatty's film The Ninth Configuration, which itself is an adaptation of his novel Twinkle, Twinkle, Killer Kane, which sort of sits sits comfortably off to one side of the Exorcist universe, a part of it, a sort of text that informs it, be it the novel, the movie, the other version of the movie. And now you've got Blatty's novel of Legion and his adaptation of that, Exorcist III, and now the Legion Assembly as well. And if you want to go absolutely crazy, you've got Exorcist II, the Heretic, and you've got both versions of the Exorcist prequel, a film which was made and then entirely remade. But clearly the entries which have sprung from Blatty's imagination are superior, and they are the key texts here. And I think it's right and proper that for this continuing story about people questioning their place in the world and beyond, questioning the nature of good and evil, God and the devil, that there are these different takes and different versions which continue to interrogate one another and prove that a definitive version of even an invented story is deceptively tricky to pin down.